Hi everyone and welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. This is Mindy Egan, and in today's video I'm going to be ink blending with the new colors and ink pads that MFT released, and we will also be heat embossing on vellum. The colors that I will be using today are Fire Coral, Candied Yam, Lemon Chiffon, Sour Apple, and Caribbean Sea. I actually have two cards I'm going to make because I couldn't decide on which color combination I wanted to do. So we have two cards for you. Now I'm going to be starting with the Fire Coral. So I'm doing a rainbow card first. I really just wanted to play and experiment and see how these colors looked with ink blending, which I am very happy with. And to do my ink blending, I am using a super smooth white cardstock and a blending brush. I started off by just picking some of that ink up with my blending brush and tapping off on the side there. You can kind of see how much ink is really coming off. For one, this is a brand new ink pad, so it is super juicy, and also the color is just very vibrant. So I want to dab off that excess ink so I don't bring on too much color right away. I would rather add more color and just put a little more arm work into the blending than coming off too harsh and having harsh lines from that wet ink. So you can see my second color there was the orange, which is the candied yam. Then I have the yellow, which is the lemon chiffon. I believe there's another yellow out there. The lemon chiffon is a really light one, so I did have to work that up a little bit. Then we have sour apple, which is one of my favorites out of their green collection. And I will be ending it with the Caribbean Sea. So I just kind of sectioned off my card when I'm blending, and I want to try and make the transitions nice and smooth, which is why I use a super smooth cardstock. The ink just kind of glides onto the paper when I have it super smooth. Now, after I finish this rainbow, I'm going to do another background, and this one is going to be using Sour Apple and Caribbean Sea. I thought these two colors looked really well together, and I actually think it comes out to be my favorite card. So I'm having the Caribbean Sea on here first, starting off kind of heavier on the end, and I want to blend out to the middle of the cardstock so it fades off into white. Then I'll flip that over and use the Sour Apple and blend on that color, same thing, kind of darker towards the end, and then blending off into white. So that's going to be where I don't really have a transition between the colors. That blending off or that fading into white is going to help merge those colors together or deceive your eye that way, I guess I would say. Then I'm going to heat emboss the Wild Poppies stamp set onto some vellum. I prepped that vellum with an anti-static powder tool, and I'm going to ink this Wild Poppies image with my Versamark ink pad and stamp that down. Then I'm going to use some gold embossing powder, sprinkle that on, and tap off any of the excess. And I want to make sure that my heat gun is really nice and hot and ready before I bring it to the vellum. And then I'm just constantly moving my heat gun and melting that embossing powder. I don't want to stay too long on the vellum because I don't want to risk burning it. I'll repeat these same steps for my other card, except I will be using white embossing powder on that second embossed image. Then I just use the coordinating die to die cut that out, and I'm going to work on my background. So I found this background stamp on the MFT site. This is the brush splatter backdrop, and this might be just one of my favorite stamps ever of all time. So I want to make sure that my ink blended backgrounds are really nice and dry before I do this, because I'm going to heat emboss this onto the background. Now the rainbow one I did in gold. I was kind of testing out some color combinations, so I sprinkled on the gold embossing powder and melted that. And for my second background, the blue and green background, I did the splatter or the brush splatter background in white embossing powder. I trimmed both of my ink blended panels down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I also cut down about 3 pieces of heavyweight cardstock to the same size and just layered those together with a tape runner. That's going to add dimension to my card. And now to attach this vellum image, which I've always found tricky and honestly has really intimidated me, which is why I haven't really used vellum before. So what I'm doing is taking a quickie glue pen, which shows up as blue, but it will dry clear. And I'm adding little dots of that all over some of the thicker areas, like the middle of the flower, maybe where stems meet, anywhere where the embossing powder kind of looks a little thicker, and then maybe even just on the very edges of it. And then I'm going to hold that down and even place something heavy on top of it for a few minutes. Now this is a little easier to see. I slid a piece of white cardstock underneath so you could kind of see more of where I was going with the glue pen. And same thing when I attach that to the front of the card, I'm going to just put something heavy on it for a while. And this worked out really well. Nothing is showing through. And maybe I didn't cover everything on here, but I have just enough areas of it attached with that quickie glue pen that really held down nice. Then I'm going to take these panels and just add some tape runner behind them and attach them to a card front that is 4¼ by 5½. I did everything first just in case I wanted to trim off that excess before adding it to the front, but I didn't have the heart to cut those off just yet. I do have 2 sentiments that I heat embossed onto black cardstock, and these sentiments are coming from the Well Hello stamp set. I die cut them with the fishtail sentiment die set, and I just trimmed off the flags at the end. And I'm adding black foam squares behind the sentiment and attaching it to the bottom of my card. I did heat emboss this sentiment to match the splatters on the background. So I have the white heat embossing on black, that'll match that white splatter. And on my rainbow card, I heat embossed the sentiment in gold to match the gold splatters in the background. And then I just finished off both cards with a few sparkly embellishments that I added with a jewel picker or an embellishment wand and the MFT liquid glue. So now here I'm just going to trim off any of that excess that's kind of overhanging so that it'll fit nicely into an envelope. That'll finish off both cards today for you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't tried stamping or heat embossing on vellum, I really recommend giving it a try. It adds just such a beautiful effect to the cards. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.